Most prisoners spend years planning how to escape, but one man did the impossible. He broke out of prison completely free, then walked back inside on his own. Why would someone risk everything to escape, only to return voluntarily? In the early 1960s, one of America's most notorious prisons sat on a cold island surrounded by freezing waters and deadly currents. The prison was called Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, located in San Francisco, California. Known as the Rock, Alcatraz held the country's most dangerous criminals. People authorities believed could never escape. Guards enforced strict routines, locked cells with reinforced steel bars, and maintained constant surveillance. Escaping from Alcatraz wasn't just difficult. Officials believed it was impossible. But one prisoner would soon prove them wrong. His name was John Paul Scott. Scott was serving time for armed robbery and had been transferred to Alcatraz because authorities considered him a high escape risk. He studied the prison carefully. Every guard shift, every hallway, every weakness in the system. Scott knew something most people didn't. The real barrier wasn't the prison walls. It was the freezing water surrounding the island. Most prisoners believed swimming away meant certain death, but Scott was willing to try. On the night of December 16, 1962, Scott made his move. Late at night, he slipped through an unsecured service corridor with another inmate. They climbed over a prison fence and silently reached the shoreline. The two prisoners slid into the icy waters of San Francisco Bay. The temperature was barely above freezing. Strong currents pushed violently toward the open ocean. Many believed no human could survive that swim. But Scott kept going, stroke after stroke, fighting exhaustion and hypothermia against all odds. He made it. Scott reached land near the Golden Gate Bridge shoreline. For a brief moment, he was free. But freedom didn't last long. The freezing water had nearly killed him. Scott collapsed on the shore, barely conscious. A group of teenagers found him lying on the ground shivering, exhausted, and unable to move. Authorities were called immediately. Within minutes, police realized something shocking. The man lying on the beach was an escaped prisoner from Alcatraz. He hadn't planned to surrender, but his body simply couldn't survive the escape. Scott was rushed to a hospital, treated for severe hypothermia, and then sent right back to the prison he had just escaped. When prison officials learned what had happened, they were stunned. A prisoner had done the impossible. He had successfully escaped from Alcatraz and survived the swim to shore. Security teams launched a full investigation. They discovered the service corridor Scott used had been poorly secured. It was a flaw no one had noticed before. After the incident, Alcatraz tightened security even further. But the damage was already done. The myth that Alcatraz was escape-proof had been broken. Scott faced serious consequences for the escape attempt. In court, prosecutors argued the escape proved he remained a serious threat. Scott received additional prison time. However, his story became part of Alcatraz legend because technically, he had done something few prisoners ever achieved. He escaped Alcatraz and reached the mainland alive. Years later, the prison itself would shut down in 1963. Today, Alcatraz is no longer an active prison. Instead, it stands as a historic site visited by millions of people each year. Even today, the story of John Paul Scott raises a strange question. If he had been stronger, if the cold hadn't stopped him, would he have disappeared forever, or would authorities eventually have found him? Because in the history of Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, some prisoners escaped, but not all of them were ever found. If you enjoy true crime stories, mysterious prison escapes, and shocking real cases, make sure to subscribe, like this video, and comment below. And tell us, do you think you could survive the freezing waters surrounding Alcatraz? Because the next story might be even more unbelievable.